It is an honor for this community, Minister, and for myself especially, to welcome you at our annual event, to thank the Mayor of Cartagena, Sergio Londoño Surek, for also being here this morning. This administration, President Santos's administration, at the beginning of his administration did a fundamental task to reform and modify institutions in order to display an ambitious highway infrastructure policy. The government has not cut corners or saved a penny in trying to make this strategy a reality. It has very big accomplishments to display and also challenges for what remains of this administration, for which Santos has been very wise in calling again on Germán Cardona to do it. So, Minister, thank you for what you already did and the best wishes of this community and the country in general for success in what remains to be done. Today is the day that the electronic issuance of SOAT insurance becomes electronic and it goes into force. And it was supported strongly a year ago by President Santos himself and his then Vice President Vargas Lleras. Today we announced to the country that electronic issuance of SOAT will be enforced as of today. And this is very important for the country, not only for what it has, because it has to do with the mechanism, fundamental social service, which is the SOAT, the universal coverage in Colombia. It protects all of those who use the public roads and highways during highway or traffic accidents, and it is also health insurance. But this is also important for the future development of the insurance sector, at least in what deals with mass insurance products. For the first time in Colombia, a mass insurance that's of most mass use enters the electronic world. The minister will share some remarks about this with us to then refer to the milestones of the strategy he's developing in terms of infrastructure. So before we listen to him, we have agreed to share with you the institutional video that fully describes the new issue process of SOAT insurance. SOAT has evolved. We have all heard talk about SOAT, but do we really know what it is and what it's good for? SOAT is the mandatory traffic accidents insurance, a protection instrument for all victims of traffic accidents that covers injuries or death of those involved therein, independently of who was responsible for the accident. For many years, we've known it only in its printed version in security paper, but this is about to evolve. How? SOAT is becoming digital and gives a new option to users in Colombia. Now you can determine how to carry it, whether traditionally as in security paper or digitally that you can save in your mobile device or print whenever you want. And what does this new form consist of exactly? It is a new form that when purchased can be saved in cell phones, tablets, or PCs, maintaining the security characteristics of electronic documents. Or, if you prefer, you can print it whenever you want. It has a QR code with information regarding the vehicle and the policy. Is it mandatory to always carry it? Yes, regardless of the format. SOAT must be carried always while you're driving. Otherwise, this will result in a fine and retention of your vehicle if the insurance is not valid. And if I have it on my cell phone and I ran out of battery, if you want a digital format, it is better to print a copy so that you can have it to avoid problems. And if I want to confirm the authenticity of my policy, you can confirm that it's authentic via 3 ways. One, through RUNT webpage with the license plate and the name of the insured, 24 hours after the purchase of the policy. 2, downloading the free app SOAT Virtual and downloading the QR code of the electronic policy. It can be used without internet connection. Or in www.misoatvirtual.com.co, following the instructions. And does the way of purchasing also changes? The way you purchase SOAT does not change. Both the printed security paper as well as the digital format, you can continue buying in the authorized sales points. This evolution will allow drivers to choose the best way to carry SOAT and will also help authorities to verify authenticity of the policies in real time, allowing them to recognize forgeries. For the health services providing institutes, it will be easier to identify what entity is to pay for the service provided to a person who's been in a traffic accident. So what is the insurance that protects us all on the highways? Buy it only at authorized vendors. It is time to evolve. Going to www.misoatvirtual.com.co. SOAT evolves. Well, good morning to each and every one of you. Jorge Humberto, thank you very much for inviting me to your important event. Like I said earlier, if I came when I was a mere citizen. Now, as a minister, of course, I come and I do it with great pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am very pleased to greet you all, Mr. Superintendent, dear Senator, dear friends who are here today. The SOAT, you've already said it. I believe this is a tool. I would emphasize that it is revolutionary in the sense that we increasingly keep abreast with the new technologies. How good that tomorrow all of these tools, and especially this SOAT, which continues to be mandatory because unfortunately in many parts or many regions of the country, it seems that people do not purchase SOAT because, as they traditionally say, this has not caught on. No, it has to be purchased. And I really like that it is very clear that penalties will continue in effect and that there's no excuse now that, no, I left it at home, I don't have it with me. No, either we have it in our mobile device, our cell phone or our app, or we have the paper version, but we all have to carry SOAT. And I would like to add something else. Before the short presentation I'm going to make on infrastructure. General Castrillon, how are you? He's the Director of Highway Patrol. Jorge Humberto, I would like to make a comment that is worthwhile keeping in mind. Some 15 days ago, I was shown a presentation at the ministry that is closely related to this insurance sector, wherein is being promoted before Congress a legislative proposal to have a tool that would be like additional to this for when there are collisions between vehicles that do not involve accidents of human beings. So if there's a crash between two vehicles, then immediately those involved in said accident, said collision, based on this proposal that's brought before Congress that I find interesting myself, will in less than 15 minutes, those involved need to solve the situation. Each will present to the other that they have this insurance that is purchased only when the matter is of the metal of the cars, and thus avoid the issues we see in our country that when two vehicles crash or when there's an accident for some minor thing, minor incident, sometimes 3 or 5 hours, there's delays and congestions because there's no way of facilitating this. So I want to invite you, Jorge, and your trade association to keep an eye open on this proposal. I don't know if it's been filed or is in the process of being filed. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I think it's very important. And before going into the subject matter, we need to talk about other subjects, especially before such a qualified audience like this one. In recent days, we have had, unfortunately, some situations with certain projects, certain infrastructure projects being developed by the Colombian government, especially with some projects that were allocated in 2009 and which today are being executed, or even some of them like Ruta del Sol number 2, which is a project where the judge who's carrying this case has already ordered the Ministry of Transportation, the government, to reassume control of this highway. We're already in that process. We are going to visit the works to see the status, because it's been paralyzed for some months now. And this has raised a concern in the sector, of course, I think also in the insurance sector, of course, in the government. Unfortunately, these are issues we need to handle because the infrastructure policy is a single one, and it's been on for several years. And although these contracts were allocated during the President Santos's first administration, they're still here, and we have to look over them. And also, yesterday, for informational purposes, some of the most important companies that have been working with the government and doing so well has also been prosecuted by Colombia's Attorney General for a matter different than infrastructure that deals specifically with certain works that were done in the city of Bogota, especially the Tunjuelo Canoas region that has generated certain issues. We, in fact, issued an official letter yesterday to the National Infrastructure Agency from the ministry saying that we know about the existing situation, but that those issues have nothing to do with the development of the infrastructure projects that this firm or its partners, who are the ones that have been called for depositions, have either with the National Infrastructure Agency or with the National Highway Institute. So in this order of ideas, I would like to tell you that we can have peace of mind. And in addition, I want to tell you that during these 2 months that I've been at the helm of the ministry, we have had the opportunity of meeting with many financial entities, international investment bankers. I have already met with many of them, with national banks. And what we have received from all these entities is an interest and full trust in what the Colombian government is doing, especially with respect to these 4G concession contracts. As you know, the 4G concession contracts were born in 2010. Once I arrived at the ministry at that time, invited by President Juan Manuel Santos, I told him that if we wanted to make an important change in Colombia's infrastructure, we should halt at the Ministry of Transportation at all its entities. That is why we put a break for the rest of that year 2010 and almost all of 2011 on the allocation of infrastructure projects through the National Highway Institute, through what was formerly called the Concessions National Institute, which was an entity called INCO. So it had a very difficult connotation, because when somebody asked, "Where are you from?" the person would reply, "From INCO." So you wouldn't know if it was a delinquent or INCO, it's a play of words, or that he worked at the institute. But fortunately, we were able to bury this INCO, and we saw the birth of the National Infrastructure Agency. This agency today is an entity. It is not me who says it, because I've only been back for 2 months, again, to accompany the president during this last period of his administration. But it's reality that says it. It's an agency that's been recognized, it's been decorated, and it has been valued by all the countries in this region, and also by international agencies, British, American, and from many other European countries, as one of the infrastructure agencies most important in the world in present times. So I say it with much pride, because also, unfortunately, today, the person who used to be president of the National Infrastructure Agency, whom I invited in 2011 to assume this presidency, Mr. Luis Fernando Andrade, is today withstanding very sensitive judicial situations that we all expect he can resolve. And he himself is arguing on his behalf, his defense, which I hope is valid. But this all makes part of those contracts that were allocated, or those concessions, correction of the speaker, that were allocated in 2009, 2010, and which today have become a responsibility of the Colombian state, logically of the government, but that we hope these types of situations do not recur. In response to what we've been ordered by justice through a very efficient administration by the Procuraduría General of Colombia and the magistrate or judge ordering these actions, we have sent official notice to the Ruta del Sol #2 contractor to return this project to the National Infrastructure Agency, and in turn, the National Infrastructure Agency, in agreement with the National Highway Institute, will be publishing public calls for bids to continue providing maintenance to this highway and prevent the generation of further problems. Similarly, we expect, I believe, early next year to once again allocate the concession of this project. These are some of the difficulties we're facing, but These are some of the issues as well. Like I was telling Jorge Humberto, when you arrive at positions like this, you know that you don't really come to celebrate, but every day you come to get up and find solutions to the issues existing and arising. But again, I want to tell you that I'm very happy to be back as part of government to accompany President Santos in the 307 days that I have left at the ministry, if God wants and the president wants, to show Colombia, as I'm going to do now in this brief presentation, how we're doing a true revolution. All Colombians, and you especially, who have supported with your counseling most of the concession holders and contractors of Colombia for the things that we're doing to become a reality, and for Colombia, like I'm also going to show you here, to start showing that it increasingly improves in the ranking of infrastructure. As you can see on this table, within the competitiveness ranking in Latin America, Colombia was a country that was very behind, and in the global index, it was further delayed. In the global index, we have improved some 10 positions according to this latest table that I show you here. But in the Latin American index, and this makes much sense, we are the 5th country with the best infrastructure. As you see above us, those who have traditionally been above us, Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, and Mexico. But until some 4 or 5 years ago, we were almost 8th or 9th within this ranking for Latin America. This is what we have invested in infrastructure during this government, especially on concessions. The government has invested during these years. Well, I had a table here that unfortunately is not on the slide, which is a table, a bar graph that I had requested, but I don't know why my advisors, they change my slides, my charts all the time, so I had that table in my head and I see it's inexistent, so I apologize. But what I want to tell you is that in these 10 years, we have invested, 7 years of President Santos' administration, we have invested more than 45 billion Colombian pesos in infrastructure solely through the National Infrastructure Agency, or ANI, A-N-I in Spanish. Of these 45 billion pesos, we've awarded approximately 30 concessions throughout Colombia. Of these 30 concessions, 8 are operating perfectly well. They have all the resources, in cash, they have the investment banking that's supporting them and working. We have another 14 concessions in the financial closing process. They've also closed with the banks and are presently organizing the disbursements with the banks. But since in these 4-generation concessions, the responsibility for executing the works after awarded and the financial closing lies with the concession holder and not the state, then these concession holders are starting to execute their works in as much as they are doing or are starting to receive the resources from the entities. And I also will tell you something else. In Congress is a draft bill that's already been approved by all the commissions and is simply ready to move to the plenary, Senate plenary, during or through which on infrastructure, we need to improve increasingly. We need to innovate day by day. So in this new draft bill, we're establishing guarantees to financial entities so that in the event that another investor shows up who's similar to the one in 2009 that I mentioned, the financial institutions can make use of the resources that are in cash to the fiduciary entities and such, for these to be returned, or for these financial entities to eventually in the future can propose the government that it will be them who will continue with these projects and conclude them, because these projects are definitely profitable. These are projects that what the government tells the concession holders is, you start your works, I will not give you a penny. I will guarantee futures after you finish the work, and tolls, so that you, with the revenues from those tolls, you can finance your projects. And this I will give you at 25, 30 years. And so after the works conclude in these projects, they become very profitable in their operation for the entities that start taking part in these projects. This is a very simple summary. Colombia has been working on these concessions for many years now. The idea of these concessions was born in President Cesar Gaviria's administration in the 1990s. Then came the first generation concessions, which is where the state practically always financed the concession holders. The 2G similarly, and 3Gs also similar. And lastly, we have the 4G generations, which is the highways or freeways that began during President Santos's administration in 2010, 2011. What you see here on the right-hand side is a map of Colombia. Here I could mention each and every one of these 30 concessions that have been awarded thus far. But I only want to here to give you a summary. This is what has been done through the National Highway Institute, which is also very important, with an additional guarantee. Public entities are always the ones that are believed is where all the corruption cases take place. And this INVIAS, or National Highway Institute, I can guarantee that since 2010 onwards, in all its processes that it has awarded, both for public works as well as for supervision of these works, there has been no legal suit on any company or on any individual. And this is an example that a well-run state can also guarantee things to operate well. This is a series of works being done through the INVIAS, or NHI, in regions of Colombia where tolls cannot be installed because vehicle flows are not sufficiently high to collect these tolls. And let me share something with you. We now have a complicated but interesting dilemma at the National Highway Institute. In 2010, we did not have a single project, not a single project with studies and designs to contract said public works. Today, we have, at present, ready for contracting 14 projects through the National Highway Institute, most of them in regions of post-conflict, very important to Colombia. But the kind discussion I have with the Minister of Finance is, why don't we open a bid for these projects? Why don't we bid them out? And since no longer are we giving advance payments, but concession holders start working under paid for execution, we can guarantee long-term future payments. But the Minister of Finance, which from a fiscal standpoint, probably much more responsible than me, but I want to make works, has told me we have to review this because he needs to think about the fiscal space and many other things. But I tell him, as well as the president, that I have no doubt that if we don't open these works for bids in the next 4 or 6 months, undoubtedly, and if this happens, I will be very happy, then the next administration, the president, male or female, who arrives next August 7th, the following day can open these call for bids and continue executing this public works plan. We're talking about almost 9 billion Colombian pesos in public works through the National Highway Institute. This is the table the bar graph I was going to show you earlier, but don't pay attention to it because this now talks about the lanes built. No, this isn't it either, Lina. Don't laugh. This isn't the bar graph either. The one I had was one relating to budget, but this one at least shows the lanes and what we are expecting to deliver in 2018. Here it says that by 2018, we are expecting to deliver 3,158 new kilometers. You can see from there backwards. And I tell you this sincerely, in Colombia's history, I'm not saying compared to President Uribe's administration or President Pastrana's or Gaviria. No, in the history of Colombia, never had such large investments been made in infrastructure. We will only have one problem, and I want to tell you right off. These 3,153 kilometers, we will surely not be able to deliver entirely or completely because with the issues we have had with the Ruta del Sol number 2 problems and the ones we now have with Ruta del Sol number 3, this can drop by some 400 kilometers. So that figure is going to be around these 2,800, 2,900 kilometers that we've foreseen for 2017. Well, this is a very brief chart that tells about logistics impacts, how we reduce displacement times. And here I must also explain to you why the tolls are important. Colombia had never been concerned about strengthening its infrastructure. Well, now we all need to make an effort because in as much as we build these works, we reduce displacement times or travel times. And as these travel times improve, well, logically, agility increases, and all Colombians have to make that effort of paying the tolls. This is a brief, very brief description. I think I'm going to show you 8 or 10 slides with a series of projects that are ongoing in Colombia that will surely, most of you don't know, but my invitation to you is to start looking at those regions of Colombia, which are all where these projects have already started. This is the highway between Bogota and Villavicencio. It's a very beautiful highway. Very important investments are being made. By late this year, we'll be practically at 95%, 100%, most of the works being built there. There will be a section outstanding, and with this section, even missing the distance between Bogota and Villavicencio or the Llanos Orientales region, will have wonderful mobility. what you see here on the right-hand side shows you how long it took to travel, or the distance between the 2 points, and how much it's going to be, how much shorter it's going to be now after the works are concluded. This is another example, the highway between Bogota and Villeta. Many of you have ridden on this highway because there's many recreational spots, many vacation homes. And this is a highway. These are works that you see. They're dual lane or dual carriage highways. Unfortunately, the ways out of Bogota, like in many other of our important cities, is difficult. But these are real highways that are providing a service to the country. This is a project that, let me tell you, has somebody seen this project? If somebody has seen, why don't you raise your hand? It's the highway between Girardot, Honda, and Puerto Salgar. I went to this project. I visited the entire project about a month ago. And let me tell you, this is one of the most important projects under construction in Colombia at present. Here we see a progress of 43%, but that project at the end of this year will have a more than 65% completion. And we calculate that this project by mid-2018, when the administration Santos finishes, can be delivered to Colombia very much advanced, not finished, because we are not going to go out and say in June or July of next year that we transformed the infrastructure and that Colombia no longer needs more infrastructure. On the contrary, from there on, this country does indeed need to continue developing its infrastructure. But don't forget, Girardot, Honda, Puerto Salgar. This is a highway that has wonderful straight lines, some crossings of the Magdalena River, a bridge that is being built in the Honda sector to cross over to Puerto Salgar, which is beautiful. We calculate it will be ready in April next year. And this highway runs along the right-hand margin of the Magdalena River in the direction Girardot-Honda, and then it crosses to Puerto Salgar and follows the left bank of the river, the Magdalena River. This is a work that makes Colombia proud. This other highway is also wonderful. I don't know if there's somebody here from the region of Valle del Cauca, which has followed or been along this, the highway between Lobo Guerrero and Buenaventura. Please raise your hand if you are here. Somebody? No? Neither? It doesn't matter. I invite you to go visit it. Listen, you can't imagine the pride, or how proud it makes me, not only as Minister of Transportation, although like I told you, since 2010 we've been working on this, but as a Colombian citizen, to see that today you can go from Lobo Guerrero to Buenaventura on a first world highway. It is absolutely beautiful. It has tunnels. It has bridges. It is wonderful. It has viaducts. I invite you, if you can, to visit this highway to see the infrastructure Colombia is going to have in the coming years. This is the Pumarejo Bridge, which is close by, an hour and a half ago, in the city of Barranquilla. The bridge is presently under construction. President Santos will not be able to deliver it or inaugurate it before August of next year. But it is a work that's had some delays. It's ongoing. It's being done by the National Highway Institute, but it is a significantly important work. This is Colombia's biggest headache, the La Linea Tunnel. This La Linea Tunnel, we've been talking about it, Mr. Jorge Humberto, how long, 15 years? Fortunately, two Colombian construction companies are finishing the tunnel. Their commitment is to conclude the works, the main works, the tunnel, the mouths from end to end, the 8.2 kilometers in length, plus all the access works from Cajamarca to the tunnel and from the tunnel's exit to the municipality of Calarcá. They calculate they'll deliver this in late July 2018. The remaining works would be the electromechanical equipment. But I believe, and given the characteristics of those two companies that are presently responsible of building this, is that in late 2018, this tunnel will be entirely in service for all Colombians to enjoy. This is the overpass in San Francisco, or the San Francisco overpass. It's a wonderful work. This is a bridge we built in Venezuela. It's called the Tienditas Binational Bridge. This is a work together between Venezuela and Colombia. Today we're a bit divorced, but we continue loving each other. And I believe that this bridge is going to be extremely important for the relations between the two countries. Given that, like we talked to former President Chavez, may he rest in peace, what Venezuela wants is to reach the Pacific Ocean through the Colombian highways. And for this reason, the proposal for this bridge and the building of this bridge, it is there. And we have a series of highways in our country from east to west that eventually will reach Buenaventura. Well, this that I have told you is simply a sampling or an appetizer. I could stay all day here talking to you about these projects, but this is just to give you a taste. And to conclude, there is another wonderful project, the Tertiary Roads, or the so-called peasant roads. The government has committed 1.5 billion Colombian pesos to invest in the entire country in these peasant highways. Just this morning, I was in a meeting with the governor of Bolívar, and here, listen to this, only in Bolívar department, there's 160 billion Colombian pesos to invest in these roads. That money, well invested, is wonderful to all Colombians. Ill invested, it is ruining everything we have done in the last 7 or 10 years. So the commitment we are making today, and that we've left in writing with Bolívar's governor, and that we expect to do with the governors of all the other departments, is that all of these resources coming from the general royalties system, these resources we will invest with the support of the National Highway Institute, with INVIA's designs, with investments of this type, because I have been the greatest advocate in that Colombia needs to have designs for all the projects. It is clear to me that for these tertiary roads or peasant roads that have little vehicle flow, what we need are simple studies, but kind to these peasant communities. So INVIA's type designs and studies bid documents that are not tailored type. No, we are not going to allow this. And inspectors through the National Highway Institute, the governor's offices who want to invest this way, will have full support from the ministry and the National Highway Institute. And if one of them, those who don't want to do it, will have to submit these projects before National Planning Department for approval through the general royalty system. And there, I do believe a year and a half will pass, and they will be unable to meet the needs they have. This is a very important project. It is a project where President Santos specifically has much interest in these monies being well invested, because tertiary roads have not been exactly the best example of good budgetary investment in our country. This is a summary. Part of these roads are going to be called the 51 by 50 plan. I don't want to explain it to you because it's too long, and you already want to go out to lunch. And this is what is going to happen in the rest of the country regarding roads in all of Colombia's municipalities. In summary, then, what I want to tell you is this. Colombia, not only this administration, which fortunately had to turn this matter of infrastructure very serious, look at it very seriously, but Colombia and all of us Colombian citizens are making excellent investments to strengthen our country's infrastructure. And I am sure, without any doubt, that in a very few years, we will no longer be the 5th country in Latin America, but we will be able to be the 2nd or 3rd, because Chile has advanced considerably on these matters, and we need to work very hard to get there. But that all of us have done it, and you are doing it. All Colombian citizens are doing it. And I want to invite you to continue protecting this sector and to continue working for Colombia. Thank you very much.